Xiomara Martinez, and I will be talking to you guys today about financial aid. I am from San Jose City College. Just because we present as a community college does not mean that we're only going to cover community college topics today. We're going to talk about financial aid in a whole and how you can use it at any institution. Just to let you guys know, I will be turning off my video because my internet connection is a little bit spotty, and if I leave my camera on, it just makes things worse for me. So I'm going to be turning off my video, but if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat, and I'll be checking on that. The systems of higher education. So in California, we have 5 different systems of higher education. First is the vocational programs. So those are what traditionally are called vocational schools or trade schools. These are programs where students can go and learn a trade, either like medical assisting, there's like schools for automotive, things like that. Basically, the student is in, gets a certificate, leaves. The thing with these schools are the cost is sometimes extremely high, but also you have to make sure that you verify that the school is accredited, because what had happened, I bet most of you know that a couple of years ago, a couple of schools closed since they were not accredited institutions. All those students that graduated, their degrees were no longer valid, or certificates were no longer valid, and they had to look for retraining and pay again and go through that process again in order to continue working in their field. So you want to make sure that those institutions are accredited if that's the route that your student wants to go. The second one is community colleges. So there's 7 of us in our county, and basically we're the middle, I don't want to call it middle school, but it's the middle person between vocational programming and the CSUs, UCs, and 4-year universities, basically. So we offer those same vocational programs. We don't all offer the same ones. There's some similarities there, but all of our colleges have unique programs that they offer for certificates. So if your student does want to get a certificate, doesn't mean that they have to be with us for the full 2-year program. They can get in, get out, and get their certificate and start working. But we also offer the alternative for students who want to go to a 4-year university and for some reason didn't go straight out of high school, especially because we have guaranteed admission. But students can come with us, and then once they transfer, they'll be transferring as a junior into the CSU, UC, or private school of their choice. Now, CSU, UC, and private schools, private institutions like Stanford and Santa Clara, those are the private schools that I'm talking about. They each have their own admissions requirements. I know you all know right now, especially if you have a senior right now, they're going through the admissions process right now. Each of them have different requirements. Each of them have different deadlines to apply. But the big thing to know about each one of these systems is they each have individual costs as well. And we'll be going over those today. So where does the money come from? Financial aid resources can come from the federal government. It can come from the state government. The state of California has a lot of different funds for our families, for students who want to go to college. The colleges and universities, we also have our own funding that we can help students with. And then of course, there's private agencies, community centers, employers. So sometimes if we work as part of a union, or sometimes in our benefits packets, there's also some form of scholarship or grant for our dependents to go to college as a parent. But also I've seen places of worship that give scholarships to their students. I've seen stores like local markets that go, or big chains like Coca-Cola and things like that. So it's also about looking in your community or outside resources to get that financial aid as well. So there's different types of financial aid. The one we call need-based aid. Basically, these are grants and scholarships, and this is free money that the student does not have to pay back. The only way a student will have to pay back that money is if, let's say we give them the first disbursement the first week of school, 2-3 weeks later, the student stops attending, they get dropped from their classes, then yes, we will ask for that money back. But as long as the student continues their education and gets those C's or better, maintains that 2.0 GPA, they can continue to receive those grants and they do not have to repay that money back. Non-need-based aid is money that is earned or a loan. Basically, Work Study is a program that helps students find on-campus employment. And then loans, of course, we know that we would have to pay those back. So those are non-need-based aid. So as far as federal student aid, these are the programs that you can apply for. And I'll talk about the application in a minute. But And you don't have to memorize all of these. We have a lot of material that you can look this up, but the biggest one is how if you qualify, you can get up to 6,000. That is the same regardless of what you fill out the FAFSA. They tell you right away that your federal Pell Grant can be up to, will be $5,000. That $5,000 doesn't matter if you go to San Jose State, CSU or UC or a private school or community college, you'll still get the same amount. That's important to know because the second grant, the FSEOG, that depends on your institution. So the institution is the one that determines how much they can award you. So the cost of the school has a lot to do with that. The TEACH grant, that is a grant that is given to students most likely in their senior year of college. The reason for that is it's for students who want to be teachers, but will teach in a low income institution. And if they do not, they have to sign a contract basically saying, I'm going to be a teacher for 5 years at this low income institution, and they'll get the grant. But if they do not meet the requirements in the contract, it will become a loan and they will have to pay that back. So that's why it's not given to them until they're getting ready to graduate and be credentialed, because a lot of students change their major the first 2 or even 3 years of college. Work studies, like I mentioned, this is my on-campus or off-campus employment. We try to find a position that goes with their major. So basically, if a student is, let's say, a nursing major, we obviously cannot pay them to be a nurse yet, but we try to place them like in our health services center or in the community clinic or something like that similar, just for them to start getting that experience, what it's to be in that position. So one of the biggest things that I see as students graduate from college is they didn't work while they were in college, so they have no relevant experience. So even having these type of jobs will be very useful for them when they graduate, but it's also a way for them to explore careers. I always use our ECE program or early childhood education program as an example, because when I was work study coordinator a few years back, I would place students in child development centers that wanted to be ECE majors. And every year I had at least 3 students come back and say, I'm going to change my major because this is not what I thought it was going to be all day. You know, they thought it was going to be fun playing with kids all day, but it's actually a lot of work. They had to do the curriculum, they had to do all kinds of stuff. So they were early enough in their career where they can change their mind. They were the first or second year college students. So it's a good way for them to explore. Also, the students will not be working while they're in class. So one of the first things is they'll look at the schedule. So while they're in class, they're not allowed to work. They are students first. So the hours are very flexible. At the 4-year universities, they can use this to pay for part of their dorms. So some colleges will say, we'll give you this work study job, but basically you're paying off your dorms. I like to talk about this program a lot because a lot of students do not take advantage of this position, but it is a great program, especially if they are wanting to work. The hours are very flexible. They cannot work over 20. Like I said, they're students first. I recommend students get these jobs before they go out into the community and get a job, especially those retail jobs. A lot of students say, well, my managers told me that they're going to be flexible with my hours, but we all know being working, if someone calls in sick, they're going to call you in for a shift, and then it becomes 2 shifts, and then it becomes 3, and then you're missing all these classes. So we want to make sure that they know that they're students first and stay dedicated to that. So that's why I always talk a lot about work study. Loans. So there's different types of loans available. There's a subsidized loan, basically with that to repay the loan until 6 months after they graduate, and they're not accruing interest while they're in school. Unsubsidized loan, they are accruing interest while they're in school, but they do not have to pay it back until 6 months after they graduate as well. So there's 2 different types. The amounts vary depending on what year, if it's their first year, second year, or third year. So that the student, I tell students, you don't have a credit history. So the interest that they give you with these loans are actually a lot lower than if you were trying to go to a private bank. Question came up about work study. The work study pay is basically depending on the position, depending on the area that they live in. We do pay at least minimum wage, but I know there's some positions that are a little bit higher, depending on the position type and what they're doing. So it just depends on what position they're taking. And Elizabeth, you had your hand raised.
It was to address that question. Thank you.
Okay. So that was federal aid. In the state of California, we also have our own financial aid programs. CalGrant is the biggest one. Their deadline is March 2nd. CalGrant is a little bit different because it does have a deadline, but also because they also look at the student's GPA. So they look at the 10th and 11th grade GPA if they have at least a 2.0 or above. So that's what will determine what type of CalGrant they're offered, and also the family's income will determine which type of CalGrant they're offered. CalGrant A is for students who go straight to a four-year. If a student is awarded a CalGrant A and ends up going to community college, they can't put it on reserve, which is basically on hold until they transfer. CalGrant B is 1672 if they come to a community college. If they go to a four-year, it's basically tuition. So it's a higher, the amount varies depending on where they're at. But CalGrant B can be for a community college and a four-year institution. CalGrant C is for students who are going into a vocational program. Middle class scholarships. So let's say that your family did not qualify for CalGrant because it was too high, your income was too high, but your income is still less than 190,000 a year. You can qualify for the middle class scholarship if your student is going straight to a four-year, and it can cover up to 40% of your tuition. And EOPS, this program is a state program. It's technically not a financial aid program. It is funded through the state, but what EOPS does is helps the students with book vouchers or lending program for books, which is one of the other biggest costs that we know that students have in college. And the good thing about this program is also it's a support program, meaning that they will connect the student with a counselor, which is extremely important when they get to college, because they're not going to be assigned, if they go to a big university or big community college, they will not be reached out. They will not be reached out by a counselor, so they actually have to go look for one. And EOPS will connect them with that counselor, and they will guide them to what classes they need to take. What is the correct math class I need to take? Because a lot of students that I talk to, they're taking a class that their friend told them or a relative told them, like, hey, this is a math class that fulfills my requirement, but the math class depends on the major. If I'm in a STEM field, I'm going to be taking calculus. If I'm in psychology, I only need stats. So it's really important that they connect with that counselor. Middle class scholarship. So wait, can you please repeat? Sorry, I'm trying to go back to the question. Definition of middle class for that, it's called a scholarship, but it's actually a grant. It's basically for families that do not qualify for CalGrant because their income was too high and they make less than 190,000 a year. And they can pay, if they do qualify, they'll get up to 40% of their tuition paid. So the student still has to have a 2.0 GPA in high school and their income under 190. The annual income limit for grants. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we calculate the need for the student. There is actually, the only one that has a fine line of income is middle class scholarship. All the other ones, there's a calculation that goes into it. Difference between CalGrant A, CalGrant B. So CalGrant A is for students who are going straight to a four-year, have a 3.0 GPA or above. And CalGrant B is for students who are going to a community college or a four-year. So it can be for both. And this is a GPA of 2.0 or above. All right, so first step is to determine what application you're going to submit. So there's two applications out for financial aid. The first one is the FAFSA. So if the student has a valid social security number, is a US or citizen or permanent resident, they will be filling out the FAFSA only. So the FAFSA will be their application for federal and state aid. This is the application that you need to submit before March 2nd. All young men need to register with Selective Service. It is semi-optional this year, but they do need to register. It is law. So even if they don't do it financially, they are required to register. Students have to have a high school diploma, GED, or equivalent before they start college with us. It is a requirement of financial aid that they do have at least a high school diploma to be receiving it. This is the time that we start recommending students create a professional email address, just because a lot of them have an email address that they use for all of their social media requests or social media pages, all their memberships, all these things that they belong to. And maybe it's not the professional one. It's probably like a nickname that they made up when they were in middle school or something like that. But we wanted them to have a professional email address because this is something that they're going to start using for scholarships, for those internships, for those jobs. So it's good to have one just for that. Also, it is good idea to have one just for stuff for college, because like I mentioned, if you have one email address for all of these different social media pages and emails that you get, you're not going to see the emails that we send that are pretty important. So it is a good idea just to have one dedicated to school. When you're applying for financial aid, do not use your high school email, students, if any of you are listening, because usually what happens when you graduate high school is that email gets closed. So you won't have access to getting back into your account if you forget your password or anything like that. So use a personal email address. Do not use your school email address. You're going to have to create an FSA ID. Basically, this is like any username and password that you have for any other page that you use, like Amazon or social media pages or anything like that. You're going to need to use this every year. So it's really important that you keep it safe, keep it somewhere that you'll have access to. One parent will also be required to ask for, or submit an application for an FSA ID. And if the parent was a student or is a student, or if the parent has an older child that went to college, it's going to be the same FSA ID for this student. So start getting that information together before you apply. I'm going to talk about scholarships in a minute, but it's not too soon to start considering scholarships for freshmen and sophomore. But I will talk about scholarships a little bit more in a couple of slides. Cal Dream. So this is the state application for financial aid. This is for students who do not have a social security number or have one through DACA or just have an I-10. Same thing, they will have to have a high school diploma or GED, qualify for AB 540. Young men also have to register with Selective Service. Same thing, you'll create a username and password as well. And also we recommend that you have that professional email address. Basically, what is AB 540? This is for students who, like I mentioned, are undocumented or have DACA. Students, before AB 540 passed, if they wanted to go to college, they would be charged out-of-state tuition, which means that it would be 3 or 4 times more expensive for them to go to college. But because AB 540 passed, if a student went to 3 years of education in California, K through 12, at least 3 years, and is graduating, they can be charged in-state tuition and be eligible for state programs. So they just have to fill out this form and submit it once they are admitted to the college of their choice. Second thing we have to do is determine if the student is independent or dependent. Basically, if we're going to provide parents information or not. So usually parents, senior year of high school, they think, you know, my child's still under 18, they're still under my taxes, so I'm going to provide my information this year, but next year, if they move out, I'm no longer going to be responsible for providing my information. And that is not necessarily true. The Department of Education says that your child is dependent, meaning that we need parents' information until they can answer yes to one of these questions. So first one is if they're age of 24 or older. So if they're not over 24, are they working on their master's program? Most likely they're not. Are they married? Hopefully they're not married at 19, 20 years old, but do they have children that they're supporting? Do they have other dependents that they're supporting? Or were they in foster care or legal guardianship determined by the court? Were they unaccompanied youth who was at risk of being homeless? Are they active duty or veteran? So if your child says no to all of these, they will need your parents' information. Well, they would need parents' information. Even if they're 21, 22, living on their own, making their own money, if they're under 24 and they still do not have any of these that apply to them, they will need your information for their FAFSA. Be prepared for that. Every year, you're going to be able to provide their information. If the student doesn't have an SSN, but an I-10, can they be FAFSA filled out? No, so you will be filling out a California DREAM Act. For students transferring to a 4-year college from a community college, they would get Cal Grant B, not Cal Grant A. Cal Grant A is for students going straight to a 4-year after high school. So parent information, who is considered a parent, biological parents, of course, and adoptive parents. So if those legally adopted, they would be considered parent. Who is not considered a parent, grandparents, aunts or uncles, or other members of the house that are, or legal guardians. So it's really important that we know who is considered a parent. So of course, it has to be biological parents or adoptive parents only. What are other grant options for those who do not qualify for shown to gross income but still need the debt? I'll talk to you guys about that in a minute, how we calculate the need of a student. Actually, I skipped something in. I did. Sorry, I'm going to go back for really quick. Fee waivers. So this is really important because the state of California, all of the three major systems have fee waivers. Basically, this will pay for tuition. California community colleges, we have the California Promise Grant. So basically, our Promise program, if a student comes directly after high school to a community college, tuition is free regardless of income for 2 years. The only thing the student has to do is be full-time and maintain a 2.0 GPA. You still have to complete the application for financial aid. We just have to verify that you're not going to be receiving any other type of grants. If you don't qualify for any other type of grants, you can still get free tuition at a community college. And most of the schools, we also pay for books if the student is in the Promise program. So that's one option. CSUs have their own version of it, SUG, it's called SUG, and UC have blue and gold, but those have income requirements. Let me go back to where I was. Sorry about that. So parent marital status. And this is actually goes with the question that was just asked. So they're going to ask, what is the parent's marital status? Never married means single. Okay, the parent is single. Unmarried, both parents living together. So state of California does not recognize civil unions, but if we have the biological parents of the child who are living together, they will provide both parents information as if they were married. It doesn't matter if they are legally divorced and still living in the same house because of financial reasons. If they're both biological parents are living in the same house, they will provide both information. Married, provide both information. Divorced or separated. So if the parents are divorced or separated, we will provide the information of the parent where the student spends more than 50% of the year. So it doesn't matter who claims them on a tax return because we've seen it all. You know, sometimes one year one parent claims them, the other year the other parent claims them. So we're just looking at where does the student live more than 50% of the year. And then widowed, we would be the living parent. Also, if you are remarried, that basically means married. And I just thought of this because I had a situation yesterday. The mother was remarried. We will need that step parent information as well. Household size. So this kind of goes with it. Who are you going to be counting and part of the household size? The student, even if they don't live at home, because if they're still considered dependent, we're going to count them. Parent or parents. Other children that you have that receive more than half of your support. It does say even if they don't live with you, that's because if you have any students, any dependent children who are under 24 going to college, maybe they're going to Southern California, or maybe they're in the Central Valley, they're not living at home, but they are still considered dependent on their FAFSA, you're going to count them too. And then other people that live with you that will receive half of their support from you. So that's going to make up our household size. Would receiving one type of aid disqualify you from receiving another aid? No, you can receive multiple grants at one time. Important information you need. So if any of you have seniors and have not submitted your application yet, just be prepared to have this information ready when you do fill it out. Complete legal names. So we have to make sure that the names state exactly like it shows on our legal documents, our birth certificate, social security card. Because the first thing that FAFSA does is verify your identity. Sorry. They will be verifying your identity first, and you want to make sure that matches. Email addresses, street addresses for parent and student. List of schools the student plans to attend. So they will give you up to 10 slots for you to submit whatever schools your child wants to attend. And they will ask them, are you going to continue to live with parents? Are you going to live on campus? So basically on the dorms, or are you going to live off campus on your own? In the past, before all this COVID thing, if a student lived more than 40 miles from the institution, they were required to stay on campus that first year. It doesn't matter if you tell them, I have a relative that lives over there, that's where they're going to stay. No, they're required to stay on campus. So you want to keep that in mind. This is really important because this is, I'm going to show you in a minute how this works out, but this will determine how much need the student has, because if they're living on campus, we know the cost of dorms, so we'll know how much financial aid they need to cover that. So it's really important that they try to be if they're in doubt, I would say stay on campus, because later you can always correct it to saying, oh, well, I just decided to live with my parents. But if you are saying you're living with your parents and you decide to live on campus, that may prevent you from receiving funds, because the schools financial aid may have deadlines. So when in doubt, do the on campus if that's an option for you if you're going to 4-year. Income information for student and parent. Basically, for this year, we're using 2020 income. For the seniors this year, we're using 2020 income. If the student works even part-time, just have that W-2 ready, even if they didn't file taxes, because sometimes they will ask how much they made. Question, divorce, you'll need information from the parent who lives with the student 50% of the time. What if the student is away from college? Is it the parent who claims? No, it won't be the parent who claims. It'll still be the parent who provides more of their support. So basically, if I'm mom, dad claims the student this year, if I'm the one that's, when they're back home from college on vacation and all that stuff, if they stay with me, if this is considered home, then I would put my income, not the person. Because if you keep switching parents, what's going to happen is it's going to flag your financial aid file, and that will delay because they have to manually verify, like, okay, what's the situation? They'll ask you for a lot of different forms and stuff. So I've had parents who flip every year. They'll put one parent, and then the next year they'll put another parent, and it actually flags it for them. And we need a lot more paperwork to fix that. So just whoever the student claims is home, that's the parent that we want to put. Like I mentioned, 2020 income this year, they'll ask you what type of form you filed. If you already completed your tax return, some people have extensions. So if you will file, you can say will file. If you're not going to file because you didn't make enough, then you can say not filing. And then they'll ask you what type of form. They'll also may ask you about investments. So if you have rental properties, I know, especially here in the area, there's some homes who have a second home, or they converted part of the home into a rental property. If it's listed as a rental property on your taxes, you need to declare it as a rental property. So what is the value of that? Stocks and bonds are considered an investment. Mutual funds, CDs, UGMA and UGMT accounts. Educational benefits, so 529 college saving plans, those are considered investments. If it's in the student's name or the grandparent's name, it goes under student. If it's under the parent name, it goes under the parent. What is not an investment? The home that you live in, if you own it, it is not considered an investment. Parents' retirement plans and 401ks are not considered investments. Life insurance plans are not. Also, family-owned businesses of less than 100 employees, you do not need to put those down as investments. So scholarships, these are other types of financial aid that the student can apply for. Criteria will depend on the person who's providing the scholarship, basically. They will determine the deadline, the type of application and requirement that is required, scholarship tips, and a couple of them is to create a resume. I always recommend that students start writing down. I got this actually from one of my kids' teachers. She started having them write down whenever they did any type of community service, they received any type of award. She gave them like a journal all through high school. And when it was time for college applications, you know, they had all that information right in front of them. You know, they had a folder with all the dates that they had written down. And that's actually a really good way to keep track of it, because they may have done something freshman year, but by the time they're seniors, they forgot that they volunteered for that food drive for 5 hours or whatever it was. So you want to make sure that students start writing that down. Even in college, write it down, because when you're applying for scholarships, you want to list that information. Participate in community clubs, have someone read your resume and have someone read your essay. Those are really important. With your scholarship essays also, make sure that you're answering the question. I've read so many scholarship applications where they were great essays, but they never answered the question. They told me about their past, they told me like what they're doing now, all of this, but they never told me what they wanted to do, and that was the question. So want to make sure that you're answering the question, and you can reuse scholarship essays. I've had students who think, oh, I can't reuse it, but you can. That's totally allowable. I'm going to put in the chat FastWeb. Oh, sorry, I just sent it to Elizabeth. This is one that I recommend, well, that the student aid recommends, just because it's one that you're going to create a profile, but it actually tells you month by month, like what scholarships are out there for you. So that's when you can apply as freshmen, apply as sophomores, all of that. The question is, can you apply for FAFSA early? No, you have to wait until you're a senior in high school to apply. You can, however, go onto the FAFSA website or studentaid.gov now. And actually, let me put it in here. And there's a tool called FAFSA Forecaster. Basically, those are for students who are still sophomore, freshmen, juniors. And you can estimate you can put in your income now, and it'll estimate if you're going to be able to receive federal funds. One thing to keep in mind, though, a lot of us in this area do not qualify for federal funds, just because they're comparing our income with people all over the country. And of course, on paper, it looks like we make a lot of money, which would be nice. But in reality, cost of living here is so much higher. So don't let those things fool you, like telling you that you're not going to receive anything. The state of California, like I mentioned, like middle class scholarship, the guidelines 190. So they know that our income on paper looks, it looks high, but it really isn't. So for those of you, oh, sorry, I left out a letter. So studentaid.gov is the whole link. It's called FAFSA Forecaster. I think I left out a letter on that too. Sorry, I'm trying to type too fast. But FAFSA Forecaster is what you want to do to look at what you can potentially be receiving. I'm really glad you guys are asking questions, because I can't see anybody, so I know that you're actually listening, because I've had workshops like this where I just talked to myself for the whole hour. So thank you guys for asking questions. All right, so cost of attendance. If you go to any school that your child is interested in and type in their search bar, cost of attendance, it basically will give you a chart that tells you how much is tuition, how much is room and board, which are the two direct costs that your child will have in college. And it will also give you what's it called? An average of how much books and supplies will be, transportation, miscellaneous and personal expenses. So if they have any expenses for the program, it will list it there too. So it's basically a 9-month budget while your child, or 11 months, depending on the school, of how much your child is going to need in order to be in college. So UCLA, this is, I think two years ago, UCLA. So you see, this is where where I was talking about like what their housing information is going to be. So if my child said they're going to UCLA and they said on campus, room and board with beer, I'm sorry. Room and board would be $15,816. That amount also depends on if the student says, I want to be in 4-people suite or a 2-person suite. If I want the meal plan for 7 days or 4 days or 5 days. So that also has an effect on it. Do you have a PDF? I think we can. Elizabeth, I don't know, I'll let you answer that question in the chat. Books and supplies, like I said, this is an average cost, is not exactly how much they're going to be spending. And I say that very lightly because if your child's going into nursing STEM, your books are going to be a little bit higher than if your student is in the English major or history major, because those you can sometimes find in the books in the library and get them for free. So this is an average cost. Transportation, this is where you'll see the average cost of parking permit, how much they expect students to spend on gas or anything like that. Personal expenses, so how much it costs for their personal things that they need, like shampoo, laundry, things like that. Health insurance. If you are still going to have your child under your health insurance, you can provide proof of that, and that cost for health insurance will go away. So each different one, like if I'm staying in the halls, I need $34,000 to come to college. If I stay at home, it's less because they're expecting that they know that the parents are not going to be charging them as much rent and food and things like that. So this is a UC. Now let's look at a CSU. At a CSU, the cost is less because tuition is less, of course. So CSUs cost about $7,700 a year. If you also can note that room and board is higher. So this one's $16,000. That's because it's San Jose State. So like I mentioned before, we know that cost of living is higher here. So if you're in LA, it's 15, but if you're here in San Jose State, it's 16. Sonoma State is a lot lower. Fresno State is lower. So it also depends on the area that your child is going to school. And then community colleges, we do not have on-campus housing, but we do offer 2 different budgets. So if the student's living at home or not living at home. Sorry, I need to move this chat because for the next slide, I'm not gonna be able to see. Okay. So what happens when you submit your financial aid application is there's a formula that the Department of Education has determined based on household size, adjusted gross income, how many people are in college, the ages of the parents. So if the parent is older and closer to retirement, they take that into consideration because they know that the parents are not going to have as much disposable income, any investments that you have. So based on all these numbers and all this formula, they will give you a number called an EFC. Basically, it's the estimated family contribution. Community college is free for 2 years if they come directly to us regardless of income, yes. So how does the financial aid office determine how much money your student needs? They look at the cost of attendance, we'll subtract the expected family contribution, and that will give us a number. So like this student, they applied to Santa Clara, they applied to San Jose State, and then I did a calculation at San Jose City. So cost of attendance is different. If you notice, the thing that does not change is the EFC. So the EFC will remain the same regardless of what college you go to. The need also changes depending on what school you go to. So if my student goes to Santa Clara knows they need $60,000 to cover tuition, all of the expenses that I listed out. San Jose State knows that they need $24,000. San Jose City knows that they need about $11,000. The scholarship cover all expenses, including room and board. So this is where I'm talking about that. We look at that cost of what they need, and the financial aid office is going to try to fill that need per year. UCLA, the one that I gave you was $13,000. That's around still the same amount of tuition. I don't think tuition hasn't gone up. But if you go to UCLA, which one? This one, Elena, or this one? I don't know which one you need. But if you go to the UCLA website and say cost of attendance, it'll show you what their cost is. All right, so let me just go on and then I will ask a couple more questions. So this is an award offer. So what happens in the spring, once the students have been accepted to their universities of choice, what the financial aid offices will start doing is sending them award offers. So I know this one's a little blurry because I had to make it big, but this is a private school in San Francisco. And tuition is $45,000 because it's a private school, tuition's a lot higher. Room and board is $14,000. So basically total cost is $65,000 for this school. The ESC is $2,500. So the student needed about $60,000 to go to school. Pell Grant, she received $5,000. Cal Grant gave her an additional $9,000. The school, because they know, especially if a private schools has a lot more funding to give to students. So the school is giving this person $30,000 in financial aid, a grant, basically just from the school. So that's just the free money that the student received. Towards the bottom, you'll see that they were also offered a loan and work study. But if you, is the award offered before the students are accepted to college? No, it's after. They will not give you an award until after you're accepted to the college. But basically, you can see that that's free money. If that is enough to cover room and board, if your student is staying in the dorms, and tuition, you don't really need that student loan unless you necessarily believe as family, like, we need to cover your books through the loan, we're not gonna be able to pay it. UC, so this is one of our previous students. She transferred to UCLA and cost of attendance was $33,000. Her EFC was about $2,000 between parent and student. She applied for a lot of scholarships. So she was a really good student. She stayed on top of her stuff. So if you'll see, she actually was able to get $31,000 in scholarships and grants because she applied for the San Jose School District. She applied for some hospital grant, which is weird because she wasn't a nursing major, but she was a psych major. So she got a hospital grant. She got a scholarship from the school. She got a university grant, Pell grant, and a UC grant. So she got a lot of different offers. She didn't need to take out student loans because with that, she was able to pay room and board. She had money left over for her expenses, plus she paid tuition. So she was good. Now, this one is for a CSU. This is also one of my previous students from a couple years ago, but he did not listen to apply to scholarships. So when time came, he was from out of state, so he actually needed to stay in the dorm, so he needed a little bit more money. San Jose State offered him a loan, which he ended up taking the subsidized, which is the one that is not accruing interest. So what happens is they'll offer you an amount and you can accept it. Obviously you want to accept the grants, but you can say, yes, I want this one. No, I don't want the unsubsidized. I don't want to be accruing interest while I'm in school. And then community colleges. So this is a award offer. So we're not going to be offering $20,000, $30,000 worth of money, worth of grants, because our school is, like I said, free. So this first grant, the 1288, is basically paying for tuition, but all the other financial aid, if they are eligible, will go to the student. So the student can say, yes, I'm going to save it, or I need it to pay whatever expenses I have. So like I mentioned, each college or university will send their award offers. And these are awards per year. So every year they will reevaluate how much grants they can give a student. ESC is expected family contribution. So that's the calculation that they made based on your family's income, household size, how many are in college, and the parents' ages. So each college will send their award letters. This will happen once the student has been accepted. Each institution has different policies. So this is really important to stay on top of, because I've had some of my students who transfer and they're going to UC Santa Cruz, and one of them was offered a $10,000 scholarship. She took one day over to say yes, and it was gone. So you want to make sure you stay on top of those deadlines and submit the paperwork that they request as soon as possible. And you can only accept one. So start looking early. I know some of you said you had students who were freshmen, sophomores. It's really good that you guys are here. Start looking early for those scholarships. Look for ones that coincide with their interests, their educational goals, or hobbies, or unique characteristics. Do not pay for searches or applications. The most, especially right now, everything's done online. You shouldn't be charged anything. You know, in the past, we used to say it should only cost you the cost of a stamp, but now it's even less than that. It's free. Be careful with false promises. Those that say, yes, we're going to find the most financial aid for you. There are some agencies, especially in our area, that send parents letters or students letters saying, come to our conference, we're going to find the best financial aid package for you. And when they get there, they charge them $300 to $400. I think one year I heard it was $600. Basically, they're doing what we're doing here for free. So you should not be paying those people to help you. Never go to those places, those conferences and hotels or anything like that. Any financial aid representative will come to you in a school setting. We do not make those type of conferences in conference rooms. We make them at our campuses or on your campus. And especially right now, because of the whole COVID situation, some of us got hazard pay, some of us got laid off, some of us worked overtime, some of us got our hours cut, whatever the case may be. If your income went down, so let's say in 2020, you did get your hazard pay, you were working a bunch of overtime, but now things are going back to semi-normal, and you do no longer have that income, or even yet in September next fall when your students go to college, if the income is lower, you need to let the financial aid office know, because us as a financial aid office, we can actually make adjustments to your income on a case-by-case basis that you cannot reflect on your application. You always have to submit the application with the income that was reported for that year, but us, we can make adjustments based on dependency status. So let's say a student lost their parent, their only living parent, or whatever the case may be, then they need to let us know. If they lose income or investments, increase of child support paid or decrease of child support received, the change in number of household size or number in college, or any other expenses not covered by insurance like medical or dental, you need to let us know. Anything that affects your income going down. If it goes up, we're okay. That will be reported next year. So what's going to happen next? When you fill out your application for financial aid, either the FAFSA or the DREAM Act, you will receive a confirmation within the next couple of days. Basically, it's called an SAR or a CAR, depending on what application. They'll tell you that they will tell you that you can make corrections as necessary. The only correction that you need to make is, let's say you only have 10 slots, but your student is applying to 15 colleges. Then that is the time where you're going to erase those schools and put in the 5 new schools that the student did not list the first time. If you delete a school, that's okay. That school already got the information. You don't have to worry about that. If there's a change to, let's say, your address or something like that, minor, do not make those changes. Make them with the college, because we don't want, every time you make a change, it creates a new application process. And if you keep making these minor changes, again, it will flag you. And it also, the financial aid office will have to wait until that new application is processed. So only do them if they're necessary changes. And this page, yes, is only for a senior. And lower grades can apply for scholarships if the scholarship says it's open to all grades. So next semester, I know it's a lot of information, I'm so sorry, and it's only an hour long. But those of you that are here that are lower grades, really good that you're here. You're gonna hear this multiple times. But we'll put all the links together for you guys. I'll actually add a slide with links. I should have done that before, but I have to update it. So I will add a slide with the links and send it to you guys. And I think Elizabeth shared some links in the chat too. So after March 2nd, the California Student Aid Commission will notify students of their awards for the state programs. And then colleges and universities will start notifying students about their financial aid in their student portal. So they need to create that student portal as well. And then for web grants, so for California grants, students need to create an account called Web Grants. And basically, because they can list so many schools on their application, the state wants them to verify what college they ended up going to. So they need to go on there and say, I ended up going to Berkeley, or I ended up going to City, whatever the case may be. So Cash for College, look for those announcements because these are free workshops similar to today. So instead of Cash for College, instead of us giving you all the financial aid information like today, what we do is actually connect you with a financial aid representative or volunteer, and they will help you submit the financial aid application. So they will walk you through it. If you have any questions, they'll be there for you. Look for those announcements through your school portals because they are free. We'll be there pretty late like today to help students submit that application. And here is my contact information. If you have any questions, that's my email address, my phone number. You're more than welcome to contact me if you have any of those questions, or if you just want to tell me, hey, can you send me those websites? I can do that too. So scholarships they may or may not be based on parents' income. Some scholarships are just based on merit, meaning that they'll just look at the student's grades. If some of them will say you need to have financial need, so those might look at your income, but it will tell you there in the requirements if they're required to look at your income or not. And so Elizabeth shared the Cash for College. I'm trying to make sure that I got everybody's questions here. Where can you find the SAR? So the SAR is actually when you log into your FAFSA again, it'll tell you your student aid report. Once you submit the application, you'll find it there. And what about college advisors? Do you recommend paying for the service again assistance? So college application advisors, I wouldn't recommend paying for that either because you guys have so many resources at your high schools to help with those. You have CalSOAP, which is a lot of the members are here today. They will help your student with the applications. I know counselors are overwhelmed at the colleges, but CalSOAP works with UC Santa Cruz. And then you have DCAC advisors that work with UC Berkeley. It doesn't mean that they have to go to that school, but I'm just saying you have a lot of advisors that have gone through the process and are actually helping students do that. So again, I wouldn't pay for that service since the high schools are providing it for free, or us college representatives are providing it for free. Okay, you're welcome, everybody. I'm glad you guys benefited from tonight, but thank you all for staying so late. I know it's about 5 minutes till 8 o'clock, but thank you all for being very active in your child's education. That is really important. It is so nice to see so many parents here tonight. A lot of these events I've been doing lately, last night I only had 2 parents. So it's really nice to see you guys being very active and asking so many questions. Don't feel free to reach out if you guys have questions, but thank you. And can you please list the group that helps with application? So, well, they can help with both. So CalSOAP, DCAC, I put it in the chat, but thank you. Elizabeth, is there anything else that we need to go over?
I think that's about it. There's been a few questions about how the recording is going to be distributed, and I'm not 100% sure, but I do know that the college night event organizers will most likely be reaching out and sending out some sort of communication. We do also have the attendance list from these workshops, so we should be able to share it out with you folks. Otherwise, please just keep a look at the College Night website, and I'm sure the information will be uploaded there soon.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.